Number 3, my choice for my third favorite game of this year. Also my most disappointing game. I'm just kidding. What's funny is that Ghost of Tsushima was a bit higher on my list throughout this year. That I was considering this game to be much higher in consideration. But Ghost of Tsushima is my number 3 game of the year. And why is that? Outside of all the conversations that we had during the gameplay, for a long time, if certain things had not happened this year, this would have easily had been game of the year in my opinion. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't do anything special, right? Specifically special in terms of like gameplay and things like that, in terms of its world, not really. It doesn't really stand out amongst any of the other Yubi games, right? And their mechanical foundations. It really doesn't stand out amongst any of the other big open world style games. However, the one element that makes Tsushima very special in this specific way, not a mechanical or gameplay way, is polish. This is easily one of the most polished fucking games I have ever played. And I'm talking about polish as in environmental, visual polish, combat polish, and overall game flow. It feels very polished to the point of which a lot of open world games don't really have this shit. The last one that I remember feeling so polished and kind of being blown away that, damn, dude, they really spent a lot of time like wrapping up this entire experience into like a nice like bow, was Spider-Man. Spider-Man PS4 did not really feel in many ways like the usual open world game because it had so many interesting elements in between, like traversal and stuff like that. It made it so much fun. If the swinging did not feel as good as it did in Spider-Man, I would not have been nearly as interested. This game, yeah, for open world usually brings along jank. That's like the whole point, and clearly we've seen that this year. Open world games are jank as fuck. This game had a shockingly slim amount of jank. And its combat isn't incredible, right? Its combat is essentially Simon Says, like, enemy with big thing, switch to this thing. Enemy with hammer, switch to that thing, right? It's not, like, crazy. However, when you engage with the enemy, and you see how ridiculously polished the animation transitions are, when you kill somebody, and then exit the finisher, and then fucking pose and put the sword back in, it all looks so goddamn good. It has some of the smoothest combat I've ever seen. And that's a testament because this is open world combat, right? It doesn't really have that insane visual jank. And that's something that's commendable because combat's a very difficult thing to make it look as good as possible. And the thing that I love is that not only does the combat start off, right, the game is naturally challenging and kind of difficult, what they unlock to you and give you the ability to use throughout the game, and then you eventually get like the devil trigger practically. That shit's amazing, man. Am I gonna jump off this horse and murder this guy? No. Oh, uneventful, man. Come on. Yeah, the loading is also very technically amazing. The game came out on a previous generation and took like 5 seconds to load. Holy shit. And then if you play this actually at 60 FPS on modern hardware, it's even more incredible. Ghost of Tsushima is a funny game. It got a ridiculously high amount of praise from a lot of the Japanese game developing environment that a lot of people were thinking that it might get criticized for, right? That this game is clearly about Japanese culture. It's about history. It's about a lot of things, but it's not being made in Japan. So there was a lot of elements before the game was out that, oh, this is kind of disrespectful, you know, to Japan in many ways because it's not made by them. What I find absolutely fascinating is there's some recent interviews with Japanese devs talking about what their favorite game experiences were for this year. And largely, the two games that occupied the majority of this list for the biggest names in Japanese industry was Ghost of Tsushima and Final Fantasy VII Remake. They loved this game. They loved the fact that Ghost of Tsushima doesn't have the usual Japanese game development tropes that sort of litter a lot of the games that they have to make, like market research and things of characters having to be specifically beautiful and crazy cool. It's a very kind of brutally realistic portrayal that Sucker Punch created of Japan, and a lot of Japanese game design's a lot different from that, right? It's a bit more, it's not as grounded. I think that's the best way to say. And I think it's in its execution, right? The fact that it treats its source material with an extremely high amount of respect. And you feel that through the polish, and that's where this is all coming. That's where like this entire conversation is coming to a head here. The polish of the game, the way they treat its characters, the story, the environments. My God, dude, there was a honeymoon phase for me in Ghost of Tsushima that I think lasted until the final day I played it. Like on the last day, after however many sessions it did take, I was still at this point where I was just absolutely blown away by how it looks. And funny enough, I was wanting the third and final big area of the game, which is the snow area, to be super interesting and fascinating. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Believe it or not, all the other areas were way better looking visually than the final environment. And I think that's just because the snow evened out so much visual aspects of the game that I really liked more. It just felt like sort of a typical snow area. I think this game might honestly have some of my favorite natural environmental areas I've ever seen in a video game. And the fact that you can play this on PS5 and have it look even better, have it perform even better. Look at this shit, dude. Look at this shit. And some people didn't like this. Some people didn't like that the world felt like it was moving a bit too much, like the entire world was breathing. I don't know, dude. I think I fucking love it. I think I love the fact that wind is a gameplay mechanic, you know? I think I love the fact that even though this game is doing the same bullshit that every single other game is, oh, sprinkle a carrot in front of the player, go pick up this thing. Oh, put a little piece of information here, go to that thing. Here's a fox, go run at this thing. Like, it's doing all the same shit. All the same shit that all the Ubi games do and all the open world shit does. It does all the same bullshit. But for those reasons, I love it in this game. I was constantly dumbfounded of, let me just go fulfill this task. I'm going to do this thing. And now I've run to 16 different side missions and it's taken 2 hours because I'm enjoying getting into combat. I'm enjoying fighting these enemies. I'm enjoying the environmental traversal that the game has to offer. It's weird that I notoriously am not a fan of open world games. But Sony has managed to grab me viscerally by the balls with a couple of their first-party games, and that's Spider-Man and Ghost of Tsushima. And they're very similar games in many ways. They are insanely refined and polished open-world games. And I think I realized the thing that I don't like about open-world games is the fact that they feel relatively unpolished and kind of jank. And now that you get these things with games that have fantastical characters and environments and interesting combat, if not very polished combat. Spider-Man gets environmental combat that's super fun, even in Miles Morales. And in this game, you get extremely polished and refined sword combat throughout the entire game. I love it, man. My honeymoon phase lasted until nearly the final session of me playing this shit. Look at this shit, man! Jesus! This game's fucking awesome. This would easily be my game of the year. In retrospect, looking at this shit, this would easily be my game of the year if a couple of other games didn't exist. So Ghost of Tsushima is my number 3 favorite game in 2020. And it seems like a lot of other people agree with me, which feels good. Because this game didn't feel like it was getting a lot of press when it came out and it just was going to drop and it was going to get forgotten. And suddenly it sells an absolute metric shit ton because everyone had something good to say about it. Word of mouth did more for the marketing of this game than any of the dollars that Sony spent on it to make people buy it. Cheers to Ghost of Tsushima. Sony, cheers. You are slowly making me fall in love with your open world games, and that makes me extremely uncomfortable.